What's up, traders? Anthony Crudele here, and welcome to this week's episode of Develop Your Edge. In today's show, I'll be speaking with the Director of Research at Cornerstone Futures and owner of the Fundamental Angle, Brynne Kelly. Brynne will be sharing with us her edge in trading energy futures. And in my final thoughts, I'll go to the charts. But before I get Brynne on the line, we're going to talk a lot about energy markets today, and I want to remind all of you that there is a mini crude oil contract. You can go to activetrader.cmegroup.com and check out all the specs on it. It's symbol QM. Hang tight while we get Brynne on the line. Brynne, how you doing?
Great. It's good to see you again, Anthony.
It's good to see you. We were just talking about how you and I did our first podcast 6 years ago. I mean, time has flown by.
So much has happened in those 6 years, Anthony.
Right? It's crazy.
And this last one was like another 6 years.
I know. And throughout all the years that you and I have been talking on the podcast, we've talked a little bit about your edge. And today we're going to focus, as this is Develop Your Edge, on what your edge is in trading. And for the traders out there that maybe haven't heard some of the podcasts that we've done, go and check them out, by the way. Tell everybody what markets it is that you trade and focus on.
Well, I've spent my whole career in energy markets. I began in electricity and just have progressed throughout my, all my years through the energy space to get natural gas to oil to refined products. And so let's just call it energy.
Yeah. And over the years, every time that there is something going on, pretty much I would say mostly with the natural gas market, you'd be the first call I'd make and say, Brynne, come on the podcast and talk about it. And, and you post a lot of charts and content on Twitter. And I remember over the times that we've talked on the podcast, I was always curious as to, your style and because nobody really was posting things like you. And that's actually how I started following you on Twitter. So I'm very curious today to hear about how did you develop that style and develop your edge in trading energy?
Yeah, I started my career on a physical desk. And in that way, physical logistics are all about relative value between two things because you're trying to essentially arb out locational spreads or quality spreads or time spreads. So in that way, I never look at a market on a singular basis. I look at all of the relationships. And over time, I found that there aren't a lot of tools out there, except for maybe at the very high end, if you want to talk about Bloomberg or something like that, but that allow me to pull in and look at markets that way. So I started making them on my own, first in Excel, and then I just taught myself some Python, right? Now I just code them all. And people are always asking me, hey, Brynne, what service are you using? And I'm using, my 10 fingers. So, I like to know all of the pieces of the puzzle, and I am very disciplined about every single day pulling all of the data. I want to see it. I want to see the shifts in structure of the market, see the shifts in spreads between things. For me, those are indicators, you may say. I know how market players that physically can take advantage of differences will act. And I know what the market will look like if they act in that way. So, I'm not about big data, but I am about all the data, just pulling all the pieces. I think about if I was trading S&P futures, I wouldn't want to just see the futures contract because I'm not a technical trader. I'd want to also see all the components that make it up. And that's what these benchmark energy futures are, WTI crude oil. It's really the clearing index for all of the other locations. Natural gas, right? It's the clearing for all of the other locations in a sense. And in that way, I like to see where the opportunity is, because it's not always at the benchmark. A lot of times the opportunity is in one of the other grades or locations.
What's interesting to me with all the energy traders that I talked to over the years, and most recently on this show, like even with Eric Townsend, very few of the energy traders that I know trade outrights. It seems like pretty much almost all of them focus on the spreads, or they look at other things. They're not just focusing on the front month contract in natural gas or the front month contract in crude oil. But there's so many new traders that come into trading and they look at crude oil and they look at natural gas, and that's primarily what they focus. But yet you are a pro. Many of the other traders that I talk to are professionals and have been at this at a long time. Why is it that part of your edge is not just trading the front month contract and focusing on it and maybe in the technical aspect, like you mentioned, you're not a technical trader. Why is it so important to look at spreads and just other things besides just that front month and technicals?
Well, you're very perceptive. You picked up a lot. Yeah, I know that my edge is not technical trading. And, for so many reasons. I don't have co-located servers, right? I don't have a proprietary chart. Just me being another person looking at a chart that everybody looks at. I'm not bringing anything to the table on that. And when you get into the fundamental realm, where, especially after years and years of seeing the market, you realize that the outright price is irrelevant in a lot of ways.
Interesting.
Obviously, we saw a big swing this year, right? And there are, kind of headline maker prices, but the relationship between either the calendar structure or the spread between being able to move something, either within the US or overseas, the spreads are showing you the marginal unit. And that's what energy is. The price that's trading is, the last molecule, right? It's the last molecule that's clearing. And that's kind of setting the price. And in that way, you can establish timing for expressing something, natural gas has been a great example this year where people have an expectation of a condition that is going to exist in the future in natural gas based on beliefs about production. And yet there isn't a tightness condition right now in the US. And so you can't really get the market to move. And in that way, I don't care what the price is, that will tell me where I finally move because the condition exists. I care about maybe how a spread might react, regardless of where prices go.
Got it.
And I don't know if you want me to go into more detail on that or not, but
I would like to go into more detail on that. So basically, two things before I let you go. First is, could you just summarize in maybe a few sentences, basically define what you believe your edge is?
I think it's having spent years in the industry and understanding relative value and using that to time my trades. And it involves a lot of hard work and, constantly digging for more pieces of the puzzle. It's a big, huge puzzle, and I'm always looking at how to put it together. And that's my edge, because I do look.
So the final thing before I let you go then is you started to talk about an example. Let's just go with an example for all the traders out there that are listening. Explain to them a scenario that you've recently talked about, written about, and used to develop an edge for a trade in the energy markets.
Well, a good one would be LNG versus natural gas, because there was a lot of headlines written about LNG this week. So in Asia, which is where the LNG benchmark, JKM. It's the delivery point for it. It's been really cold there. And LNG cargoes are, something that's already on the water. It's already on its journey. Most of them are under contracts that can only, they can't be resold. So anyone who's bought the LNG has to take it into their system. So Japan and China found themselves in a situation where they needed a spot cargo. And in order to divert one away, they ended up having to pay like $36 an MMBTU for a spot cargo. And that made all the headlines and kind of raised the whole LNG price. As a result of the tightness in the market, shipping futures went up. So there's a big talk about shipping rates. Everybody wanted to go back and say, oh my gosh, natural gas in the US is going to scream. We'll be able to export this. But the thing you have to remember is, for the most part, the reason that the spread between the two widened was, one, shipping costs went up at least $3 to $4 an MMBTU. And two, the spot market just had a condition, that we can't participate in. And so you have to think of the market as downstream and upstream. Natural gas is downstream of freight rates, meaning it doesn't, if foreign markets move up $3 to cover an increase in freight rates, US natural gas they're downstream of that. And LNG is upstream. And, once I put the whole scenario together, I took European futures and I took, US natural gas, I took transport, I took all of the pieces of it. And you can see that for the most part, the ARB itself didn't change. It just got more expensive. And so the end price had to go up. And in that way, I wouldn't get caught buying the high yesterday, let's just say, in natural gas futures. And of course, today, the European futures pulled back. And so it's knowing where to look, where the condition is, and then being able to call BS on a move, right? Or not, or think it's not done or has just started. And of course, today, after people kind of digested and maybe crunch some of the numbers themselves, the market couldn't really sustain those levels. It had just shifted in response to a short-term problem that wasn't a long-term problem.
You mentioned that it's part of your edge is like putting together a puzzle, and boy, it's so unique. It's so different than really, I would say most traders that I speak to all have something unique about your edge, but your edge, I would say, is probably one of the most unique that I have heard. And you talk about experience, time, putting together a puzzle. For the energy traders out there, for the newbies or the ones that have been doing it for a while, what would be a piece of advice that you would give them in helping them develop a greater edge in trading energy markets?
I would say, look under the hood and look deeper than you think you're looking. If you're trading technically, trade technically and don't pay attention to anything I'm saying, right? If you're trading, if you even do one thing, like look at the inventory report during the week, right? You've now moved into, you're trying to take some fundamental cues. Look further. The energy, the weekly reports are essentially old news. You haven't found yourself any sort of edge. When you look at a commodity, find the benchmark, find how the flows, how it's transported, find the price curves and the future curves for that. Quandl is a great resource to pull free curves, settlement prices. There's tools out there that you can use if you don't have anything. So, look under the hood. And when you think you've found it by looking at like inventory and weather, you haven't even started. Look further, because that's not an edge.
Before I let you go, you put out a report. I always look forward to reading it. Tell all the traders out there, for the traders that want to get more homework on the energy market, where they could find more information that you put out.
So publicly, I write a weekly research report for Cornerstone Futures around crude oil and all the markets. And I do very similar analysis on, trying to find what the anomaly is across the complex every week and talking through that. And that's on cornerstoneglobalcommodities.com. And then the other public stuff that I post would be just through my Twitter feed. And I post things because I want to see what people think.
Yeah.
I myself never consider that I have all of the data. And, you'd be surprised if you drop something out there. A lot of comments are not useful, but a lot of them tell you, oh, okay, that's how people are thinking. That's valuable.
Yeah, it is. Brynne.
And that's just Brynne K. Kelly that's my Twitter handle, so.
Yeah, Brynne, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. Like I mentioned in the beginning, we've been talking for 6 years. We've become good friends.
Yeah.
I've learned so much from you. Thank you so much for joining me today on Develop Your Edge.
Thanks for having me, Anthony.
Hang tight, traders. I'll be right back with my final thoughts.
24/7 access to diverse global markets. Right here.
That's why I added stock index futures to my trading strategy. Now when I see ups and downs coming, I'm ready.
Well played.
Get S&P 500 and NASDAQ 100 by the slice. Just 1/10 of the pie. Trade the tastiest index futures, micro E-mini options with TradeStation. Get a piece of the pie now.
Final thoughts for today, traders. I thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with Brynne. I've learned so much from Brynne over the years. And one of the things that I'm always excited to talk about with Brynne is really her mindset and how she trades markets, and today, how she developed her edge. It's so unique. She talked about how she puts together a puzzle. And I mentioned it was one of the most unique edges that I have heard from many traders that I've spoken to on this show and in my podcast. And I pulled up a chart of the natural gas market on a 60-minute on TradeStation, not to talk about the chart, but to say that, look, anybody can pull up a chart and look at the technicals and learn them. And sure, you could develop an edge there. But what really is inspiring about Brynne is that she took her time. She dug deep and went well beyond what the charts were just showing her to develop an edge. So I think it's an inspiration to all traders out there. If you want to find an edge, look beyond the charts, and maybe you'll find something that nobody else has and is using. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, please put them down below. You can also follow me on Twitter at Anthony Crudele. Don't forget to check out Instagram, Anthony C. Crudele. That's a wrap for today. See you next week.